Episode 7, the other health stuff, part 1. For the quick tip, we're going to go over putting things in reverse here, going backwards to get stronger so you can go forward even better, right? So, and what do I mean by that? We're going to talk about backwards or reverse training, okay? And it's kind of weird, but very beneficial. For the main topic, we're going to go over part 1 of the other health stuff. We're going to talk about making it hot, the sauna, okay? In part 2, we'll probably go over cold plunge, red light therapy, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, all of these additional health items that are good for you and used properly. But I want to go over the things that most people, or a lot of people, the general public rather, do not actively participate in, but they could be very beneficial for your health, right? For the first random topic, I want to go over, well, listen, Starbucks has a new CEO. Why am I even talking about that? Well, first of all, it's random. And I promise you we're going to have some random topics, but there are some things to learn from this, okay? And the second random topic I want to go over is a little bit, so I mentioned up front that this podcast is not going to be very political, even though I'm kind of, I'm not going to say active, but I'm cognizant of political things, and I have a lot of political conversations. So I just want to go over why I'm not digging into that so much, because my view of politics might be a little different, or it might be exactly what your view of politics is, and then we can kind of go from there. What's going on, everybody? I hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you're listening to the Scowl Method podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but spiritual fitness, mental fitness, and emotional fitness. Let's get to the episode. All right, so for this episode's quick tip, put it in reverse. I want to kind of discuss with you a little bit the benefits of backwards walking, but not only just backwards walking or walking in reverse, backwards jogging, backwards sprinting, backwards bike riding, backwards sled drags. They are super beneficial to your body, to you, and it contributes greatly to your overall health. Now, what are those key benefits? The key benefits really come down to, well, it improves balance and coordination, and it actually has some cognitive benefits as well. Now, let me set that aside real quick. It improves your balance because, and let's look at it this way. If you're at a desk and you're at an office all day, every day, and you're sitting on certain muscles, and you're basically telling your body, I don't need these muscles, right? And if you're sitting more than 8 hours a day, you got a problem, right? Because now your body is literally going to adapt to that. As your body adapts to that, you're basically just turning off certain muscles. And it's like, well, we don't need to send a muscle building stimulus. We don't really need to send any signals to use these muscles. Why? Because you're sitting on them, right? Backwards walking can actually reverse some of the harmful effects that come from sitting down all day, right? So that's a huge benefit right there up front, right? But like more specifically, what does it do, right? So you could let's just start with backwards walking, right? It does improve balance and it improves cognition, improves coordination, and it does that by way of really strengthening the muscles that you typically would not use. So if you're walking forward all the time, you're using a certain set of muscles, primarily your quads, and you use your tibialis a lot. So basically all the front muscles, right? So hip flexors, bringing your leg up to actually take that step and all that fun stuff. So if you did it in reverse, you will be working all of the back muscles, glutes, hams, calves, right? Those are just as important, especially if you've had any knee issues at all. One of the main points of rehab for anybody who has had a serious knee injury, they start to ease into walking backwards and doing things going backwards because you want to strengthen up all of the muscles that connect into the knee, both front and back, right? So backwards walking has great benefits in terms of strengthening those muscles that you typically would not strengthen, just with regular forward basic walking, right? Another pretty decent benefit to walking backwards in general is, or doing any of these exercises in reverse, is it improves your proprioception, which is kind of a fancy way of saying this is improving your body awareness as far as where your body is placed and how it's positioned spatially, right? So it's like a prime example of this would be somebody who cannot feel that their back is rounded on a deadlift. Now, I'm not getting into the argument or the debate about whether your back can round or is it, what's permissible, what's not. I'm just saying in general, their back is rounded and they can't feel that their back is rounded and they think it's straight. That's a person who typically has they're lower on that scale. So, but walking backwards actually gives you that sense for where your body is, where your limbs are, and how they're moving and how they're positioned, right? Which is a great skill to have, especially if you are doing any form of resistance training, right? You need to know where your body is positioned, how it's positioned in order to pull off proper form. And these exercises in particular that I'm going to list out real quick, or just in general, going in reverse is really good for our aging population, right? Because one of the number one things that causes trouble, I'll say, is the lack of balance. And then that leads to falls, and that leads to more complications and more issues than you would believe, right? It leads to a lot of issues. A fall for an elderly person is, straight up is one of the leading causes of death, which is not great at all, right? So the more you can maintain your balance and still maintain your coordination and all that fun stuff later on in life, the better off you'll be, and the better quality of life you'll have. So walking backwards is actually a really good exercise for that population. It's also really good for athletes. If you think about it, football players do it all the time, especially, cornerbacks, right? What's the number one thing they have to do? Backpedal. That's all. That's basically just sprinting backwards, right? But it's good for your knees. It's good for your glutes. It's good for your hams. Good for your calves. Good for your coordination. And especially if you're an athlete in general and you can backpedal and then explode out of the backpedal. Yeah. So I'm starting to geek out a little bit, but that's good for you, right? So how do these exercises break down, really, right? And you got to think of it this way. If you're walking, just walk backwards. Like if you're on a treadmill and you have the guards, start off walking on the treadmill backwards, holding onto the guards. But then work your way, and I wouldn't work your way up according to, by speed, but just work your way up according to balance. So you can better balance yourself as you're walking. You won't need to hold on to the guards anymore. That's your first point of, first goal to set out in front of you when you're walking backwards, if you're using a treadmill, right? Or you could just go outside and walk backwards, but just, watch out for curbs and tree limbs, rocks, people, right? So just look out for that stuff. So again, either way, make sure that you have the guards around you to be able to do it safely, and then kind of build your way up. That's why starting on a treadmill is pretty decent in this case. So another exercise suggestion that I have here is to do your sled pushes or your sled drags and do them in reverse. So if you were doing this like a heavy sled drag, you have the sled or whatever, or the tank, whatever you want to use at that point in time, hook it up and grab some handles and backstep your way, locking up your upper body, of course, and then just backstep, going back little by little your way across, as opposed to maybe like having a harness on and you're kind of just turned around and you're, moving forward, digging into the ground, trying to, pull this tank that way. You can put that in reverse. You could do that also with in terms of sprints. I mean, I go back to like the jogging. Like you could do a backwards jog. You could do a backwards sprint as well, right? So a backwards jog, you're a little bit more upright, and it actually kind of looks like you're galloping. And I do see the backwards jog pretty often. A lot of soccer players do it, right? So I see the soccer players, they'll kind of jog forward and then just keep that same position, and they'll jog backwards up and down the soccer field, which is doesn't sound like fun. I probably would have fun doing that. Anyway, you could do a backward sprint, and as like I said before, that's what cornerbacks do basically, where they lower their hips and they're down in like an action stance, and they're just pat, and they're stepping back, right? But they're really pushing their toes into the ground to propel backwards, right? That's a really good way to develop. First of all, it develops explosive power, but it also really develops again the glutes and the hamstrings, and it gets them working in unison to get you to move your body and still maintain your balance, right? So those are probably the best ways that I can think of, like ways to implement it. Start off with the walking one. That's the easiest one. Pop on the treadmill, turn around, and step it backwards. We're not worried about speed. We're worried about balance at first. And then once you maintain your balance, then you kick up the speed a little bit. You can even do some of those, hips low, backpedaling, backwards sprinting. I don't know how well that will work out on some treadmills, but I know some of the self-propelled ones, it works out pretty well. And you just, hop, skip off, right? But I wouldn't suggest that if you're like, have knee issues or anything like that. But so that's what I would suggest doing, right? Next time, even for like a warm up, test it out for a warm up. You're gonna warm up on a treadmill for a little bit, 2 minutes 30 seconds forward, 2 minutes 30 seconds backwards, and you'll be good. You'll be good. I actually typically do that for leg day warm up. In fact, I actually have an air bike here, and that's another good apparatus to use where you can do forward and backward. Now, it doesn't have the exact same effect as maybe backwards walking, but what I found was when I'm going backwards on the air bike, it actually gives me a decent stretch in my knee or in my knees. I got it in both of my knees, not just one, right? And it just seems I warm up a lot better. So it makes a lot of these squats and even like leg extensions or whatever, but leg press and things like that much easier in terms of how it feels on my joints, right? So there you have it. That's the way I would go about it. Put it in reverse. Go for it. Let me know how it goes. All right, so here we go. The other health stuff, right? Now, what do I mean by the other health stuff? Right? These are things that you would do typically, so they're not absolutely necessary to have in your routine. But these are things that I do that keep my body in like tip-top shape and top condition and performing well, recovering well also, right? So it's one of those things where there are many benefits to these things that I'm going to list out to you. And these really, I'm just listing out 4 of my favorite. Well, okay, so 3 favorites and 1 that I absolutely hate. Like, I think I truly do hate this one thing, but the benefits of doing this one thing are so tremendous that I can't ignore it. And we already know. So if I'm starting with my favorite, which is the sauna, I think we have an idea of what my absolute least favorite, the one thing I hate is. But we'll get there. So, like I was saying, these things that they're not at all necessary, but they are really good to throw into your routine or your health and wellness routine once a month maybe or something like that, just to keep your body in decent condition, right? And I'll explain all 4 of these things and how they benefit you and how they actually lead to longevity, right? So First thing we're going to start with, though, is the sauna. The sauna, again, my absolute favorite. I love the heat. I love the sweat. I love all that stuff, right? But when it comes to the sauna, that's my jam. And it's been my jam for years. A lot of years, right? But what is the sauna, right? So basically, you go into the sauna is this room that's a heated up room, right? So it's a small room typically. I mean, sometimes they have bigger ones, but whatever. There's a small room that you go into, and it's heated up to like somewhere maybe 155 to 215 degrees, right? Fahrenheit, right? So this room gets hot, right? And there's two versions of the sauna that you can go for, right? So there's the dry version, that's the infrared sauna version, and there's the wet version or the steam version, right? So the whole point here, though, is you enter into this warm, hot room and expose yourself to this heat so that you raise your core body temperature up some degrees, right? Now, there's some benefits to that, and I'll set that aside real quick because it's just one quick note about the temperature of each, right? So typically for the infrared sauna, the way that works is it basically sends infrared rays deep to penetrate your skin, deep into your muscles. And so it raises your core body temperature more like internally than externally, right? So you have the opposite of that, which is the wet sauna, which is usually by steam. And that is basically you heat things up, you put some water, you use the steam, and it heats up the entire environment. So the external environment is hot, and then that raises your core body temperature. It takes more, it's basically you think like if you heat up a room to 215 degrees, more than likely you'll want that to be the wet sauna because you're heating up everything. You're raising your core body temperature from outside in. Whereas on the infrared sauna, you don't need it to be as high of a temperature. That's why you can go on the lower end with 155 degrees because you could still raise your core body temperature because that's kind of more from like an inside out type thing, right? Because of those rays penetrating your skin and getting deep into the muscles, raising your core body temperature from there, right? So those are the two types. Those are the two types of sauna and what I typically do. I've done both, but I really, really like the infrared sauna because it's just, I guess typically it's just easier to breathe, right? Like when you're sitting in a steam room and like first of all it's hot and then it's very, very, very humid. Like it's really difficult to breathe in that, and it tends not to be as comfortable for me. So I will opt for the infrared sauna because, you know, you can still breathe fine and still sweat a lot. And I mentioned sweat, but the funny thing about this is sweat isn't even like the fact that it makes you sweat. That's not one of the greatest benefits. Actually, it's probably on the bottom of the list of benefits that you get from going to the sauna. So, and I know what the general perception is just like, hey, look, you go to the sauna to sweat. Well, what else? You sweat these out and sweat that out and so on and so forth. I'll deal with that a little bit later on, but that's really not even top 5 on a list of benefits that you get from the sauna. It is a benefit, but when I list off the other ones, you'll see what I mean, right? So the next thing that I just want to make sure that we're clear on is that like a lot of these findings are, and I guess you can assume this for most of the stuff that I say here, right? Most of the findings are both experiential and they are scientifically backed, or they're one or the other. But I'll let you know which it is, right? So I'll let you know if there's some studies that said this, and then I experienced it. Or there's some studies that said this and I didn't experience it. Or I don't know any research that's backed this information, but here's what I experienced, right? I'll let you know what is what exactly. But a lot of this stuff in terms of the benefits or the benefits that you gain from going to the sauna, they are heavily researched and scientifically backed, right? There's a couple other ones that got my body to adapt and change in a particular way, and then I'll just lay those out as well, so that you get a total picture of what it is that we're actually doing here when we're going to the sauna. And I also just want you all to know that I'll refer to a Dr. Rhonda Patrick in a lot of these instances and a lot of these benefits. She's done a boatload of research, and she's talked to a whole bunch of different other doctors who have done research as well concerning the sauna. So she's pretty much my go-to source for anything sauna. And I'm just keeping it straight up. So I'll probably throw a little link in the description for you to kind of just peruse our website and everything like that, and look at all the studies that all this information is coming from. So I'm going to be paraphrasing quite a bit, but just know I'm mixing some of my personal experiences, but when it comes to the scientifically backed stuff, it's coming from her, okay? All right, so what are all these benefits of doing this crazy thing, sitting in this hot behind box and sweating up a storm? Well, listen, look, one of the main benefits to sauna use is basically just improved heart health, right? And I mean, the improvements to like the improvements of your heart health basically are comparable to the improvements that you get from exercise. Okay, that's big there, right? Which means there's improvements in blood pressure, there's improvements in heart function, and there's also less of the bad inflammation in general in dealing with a lot of the portions of your heart. So it has very, very comparable outcomes as exercise, right? So, and because of that, think about it, like because of that, and as an additional benefit, right? That means your chances of getting or popping up with any of the heart diseases, right? Like cardiovascular disease, congenital heart failure, any just heart disease in general, period, like, which is the leading killer of everybody in well, I'm not gonna say the world, but at least I know in the U.S. that's the leading cause of death, right? Heart problems, right? So anything that even falls under that umbrella of heart issues, sauna use decreases the chances of you getting any of that stuff or developing any of that stuff. So right there is just a win, right? I mean, so, because we got to take care of our hearts, and we typically don't. But I think we are moving in a way that we're becoming more cognizant of. Yeah, maybe I need to take care of my old ticker over here, right? I don't know why I sounded like old ticker. Man, every time I speak, I feel like I'm getting older. Okay, whatever. Okay, let's set that aside. Set that aside. But that also, just going back to the inflammation part, I want to touch on that a little bit, right? So there are studies that show that sauna use decreases the amount of C-reactive protein that's in your blood, basically, right? And C-reactive protein really only pops up due to inflammation, right? And I'm not going to go into all the weeds of what that is and how it's made up and where it comes from and all that fun stuff. Just in general, know that sauna use decreases inflammation, and it decreases the instances of anything being inflamed, especially when it comes to your heart, okay? And as good as it is for your heart, it's also just as good for your brain. So what sauna use does is it also causes you to develop new neurons, right? So, and that one's pretty awesome to me, because it's just like, well, yeah. So it allows you to develop new neurons, and with that, and I guess it does it through this mechanism. Through another protein. I don't have the exact name of it, but there's this other protein that your body produces basically under this heat stress that can also potentially heal the symptoms of anxiety and depression. So sauna use is also really good for your brain. So we already have two major benefits right here so far, right? One is it's great for your heart. And these are all backed by studies and everything like that, comparable to exercise. And it's also great for your brain. So, and again, another thing that's backed by studies. And it's just amazing that more people don't do it. So remember, it improves. Sauna use improves blood circulation, right? So we said, hey, look, it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain, but there's also really good to prevent any cognitive disease or prevent cognitive decline. Why? Because again, you have better blood circulation in general. That also means you have better blood circulation going to your brain. So what and this is all like this is done through a multitude of studies, right? Sauna use can actually slow down the rate of decline in Alzheimer's patients, which is that's major. That's major. So it also just in general slows down cognitive decline, which that's a pretty big benefit, right? So again, and let me go back a little bit, right? So it's like it's great for your heart, it's great for your brain, it's preventative in any of these major diseases that seem to be taking us out everywhere. Of course, sweating it out is going to be last on that list, right? And the interesting part concerning the Alzheimer's patients, right? Like, so not only does it ease the symptoms and the rate of decline in Alzheimer's patients, it actually is preventative as well here, right? So by increasing the circulation of blood to your brain, that acts as a preventative measure of getting, I guess, preventing you from getting Alzheimer's in the first place. So it's just like, so again, good for your heart, good for your brain, very, very good for both. Now, sauna use also promotes better brain function in general, which kind of means, look, your brain actually will work more efficiently. So it enhances attention span, and it will work more effectively, right? So you'll be able to keep your focus more too, right? So it's interesting. Like there's two hormones that your body produces when your core body temperature is raised up that way. It's norepinephrine and prolactin, and simply put, they're responsible for a better attention and better focus. And simply put, they're responsible for more efficient and faster brain function, right? So, if you're say watching a 10-minute video, you don't cut off after the first 30 seconds because you have an attention span that's past a rock. Just all right, I'm playing, but kind of serious, right? So, yeah, that's also another pretty big benefit with the brain. So notice that there are a lot of cognitive benefits to, a lot of brain health benefits to sauna use. Now we get to my favorite. I'm always talking about my favorite. This is my favorite. I almost sound like my son. That's my favorite. Everything is my favorite. But I will say the number one benefit as far as my list is concerned, I may as well just say my favorite. Sauna use improves metabolic function. Now, that's kind of like a catch-all phrase there, but I'm gonna start right away with it increases growth hormone naturally without steroids or other things. No injectables. It improves your growth hormone, and I mean, like it improves growth hormone production significantly. And again, I can't overemphasize this. When I say significantly, I mean significantly. Dead serious. Now, I have these two studies that I wrote down the results for and all that fun stuff, and I want to rattle them off to you real quick. So, one study showed two 15-minute sauna sessions at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, separated by a 30-minute cool down, resulted in a 5-fold increase in growth hormone. That's 5 times. That's 500%. 5 times. Five. Five. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth. Five. And if that's not impressive, there's another study that had participants do dry sauna at 176 degrees Fahrenheit twice a day for 7 days. And they showed a 16-fold increase in growth hormone by the third day. That number doesn't even make sense to me. 16 times the amount of growth hormone production by the third day. And there was another part, those effects lasted a few hours after the sauna. So your body is being flooded by growth hormone throughout the sauna use. So if you combine that with exercise, you have, especially along the lines of resistance training and efforts to gain lean muscle tissue, well, guess what? You just gave yourself a 16-fold or 5-fold boost to your workouts, right? So there's probably my number one reason for using the sauna, right? Again, heart health, absolutely great. Brain health, absolutely great. Get to get a little bit more lean muscle tissue. That's the winner. Say you're a meathead without saying you're a meathead, but but that's the idea here, right? Like, it improves growth hormone production by a lot, and I mean, these are not like statistically insignificant studies or statistically insignificant results. That's major. 5-fold to 16-fold. That's a lot, right? So another big benefit when it comes to metabolically, it lowers your fasting blood glucose levels, right? So people with diabetes or people who are pre-diabetic, sauna use could help them out quite a bit as well. And then what it does to your muscles, basically, it improves. Well, there were some things that showed that it can improve muscle endurance, and I can see that. I don't think I've experienced that many benefits in terms of muscle endurance from sauna, but I'm not sure, right? So, but there are some studies that say that it can improve muscle endurance. And then the last benefit really comes down to it's another muscle building thing here, right? But it slows down. So there's this process of, all throughout your entire day, you're building up protein and you're breaking down protein. So you're building up muscle, you're breaking down muscle, and those processes go on all the time, all day, all night. That's just the way the body works. So you're building and you're tearing down at the same time, right? So there's this net protein gain or net protein loss. And what sauna does is basically slows down the process of breaking down protein or protein degradation, right? And it allows your body to produce these heat shock proteins, which also kind of jumpstart protein synthesis. So we're kind of tipping the scales a little bit here, and then maybe look at it that way, where it's just like, hey, I'm building muscle, I'm breaking muscle down at the same time, right? And whenever you have one side, the muscle breakdown side, a little bit heavier than the build-up side, the scales are tipped, right? What sauna use does is basically it tips the scales the other way, where you have more on the protein synthesis and muscle building side than you do on the muscle breakdown side. And that ultimately is good because it leads to, again, lean muscle tissue. And I have already explained how, and I probably will explain even more again, why lean muscle tissue is so important, especially as you age. So those are all the non-sweating benefits to sauna use, right? So, but here's the thing. Why did I really put getting your sweat on at the end here, right? And it's primarily because this is a very contested idea, very debated upon idea here. And let me break it down a little bit more for you, right? So again, heart health, absolutely great. That's a win. Brain health, absolutely great. That's a win, right? So prevent a lot of heart disease, a lot of brain diseases, and that's ultimately more important than just getting your sweat on. But what people have kind of separated themselves into camps doing, and I'll explain exactly where I stand in a little bit. There's this group of people who say basically like one of the benefits to sauna is that you sweat and you can eliminate toxins from your body or heavy metals from your body through your sweat. Okay. And that's, that was a big trend, right? Because that's what led into this whole idea of detoxing, right? So I'm going to detox through my sweat. I'm going to get it all out. I'm going to sweat out all this lead or mercury, cadmium, whatever. Heavy metals, for the most part, is what I hear. Other items, I mean, people have taken it pretty far in that sense, right? So, but they say you could sweat it out, and you're fine. But there's this group of people, a group of doctors, and a group of individuals who said that there is no evidence to support that you can sweat out toxins, that you can detox through your sweat. And then, coincidentally, the very next sentence that they typically say is that, well, your body does enough to be able to detox. So a lot of that stuff is going to come out in your urine or other things like that, not likely to come out in your sweat. So basically you want to work your kidneys and you have your organs in place to be able to do all the detoxing that you need. And then they go next usually with, buy my product. It's a detox product that you swallow. And I've seen that way too many times. Now, granted, at the time of them speaking, there might not have been a bevy of evidence to say that you can detox through your sweat. And please keep in mind that a lot of these professionals labeled this new trend as something silly and something that was lacking evidence. Okay, so as another aside to an aside here, this is going to sound a little strong, but some doctors get on my nerves. and this is a perfect example of that, right? There have been so many times in history, in recent history, actively going on now, that doctors and other professionals within the medical field, within the fitness and health and fitness industry, like there's so many times where professionals would label something as or label a phenomena as silly, as just, oh, here's the next fad that's coming through, right? Because there isn't enough data to support it. And that kind of grinds me up a little bit for this reason, right? Because these professionals have clients and they have people that come to them, and that's where we have this phrase where it's like you follow the doctor's orders, right? But the problem is so many doctors and so many professionals in the medical industry, in the fitness industry, in the health and wellness industry, there's so many professionals who are so by the book that they blind themselves to other legitimate ideas. And I know that might seem a little strong, and I don't mean to offend or anything like that, but that's one of the main reasons why, like, alternative medicine and and especially like if you talk about a functional medicine practitioner to any general doctor in the medical industry, especially any stalwart in the industry, they will immediately just look at you like you have two heads. Like the alternative medicine, functional medicine practitioners are frowned upon. Now, in some instances, I get it, because you have situations in which these certain functional medicine practitioners would take things, to the extreme, when probably the best choice would have been a medication of some sort, right? and so sometimes they get a little lost in the sauce and they get a little too complicated where it was like, hey, we don't want to put this toxin in our body because, well, even though this would absolutely save your life. And, so there's a balance that I don't think is there, quite frankly, when it comes to functional medicine practitioners. But that doesn't mean that the whole idea of alternative medicine and it doesn't mean that, some of the functional medicine practitioners are just so way off base that we can't, even listen to them, right? So what I found, though, is that a lot of them are frowned upon and a lot of alternative medicine ideas are frowned upon because they lack financial incentive. Hang with me. I believe there is a financial incentive for some of these professionals to relegate anything that deals with alternative medicine to the trash heap, because a lot of that stuff, and I might be getting into some murky territory here, but so be it. A lot of the stuff that deals with alternative medicine and a lot of the stuff that the functional medicine practitioners deal with is prevention. And that's actually the exact opposite of what our current healthcare system is here in America. Our healthcare system is not at all designed for prevention. It's wholly reactionary. So it makes sense that you would have the people who make the most money off of a reactionary system frown at the people who are preventative. And I think I'm just going to leave that there. We could debate about that. That might be a different podcast topic. It might not be. Listen, if you feel that strongly about it, you can let me know in the comments. But that's my perception. So anyway, a bunch of studies came out basically that showed that you can eliminate toxins through your sweat. and then it's just like, well, okay. And I'm not gonna beat a dead horse here. So then why is this last on my list here, right? Like, why am I explaining this last? And why am I saying eliminating toxins through your sweat or using sauna for that reason is the least of the benefits here, right? And it's primarily because there's this group of studies, and there was one in particular that was done where people were separated into groups. One group did vigorous exercise, basically. I think it was running so that they could build up a sweat. And the other group just did sauna use. And they basically measured the amount of sweat or amount of the heavy metals that was present in their sweat, that they excreted through their sweat. And what they found was, through sauna use, while there were some removal of the heavy metals, it wasn't really that significant. But of the people who were actually exercising, they expelled a lot of heavy metals from their system, right? Now, I'm sure, and I didn't really, read the study front, cover to cover or anything like that. So my hope is that the amount of heavy metal in each person's bloodstream was one of the controls, right? Because it would, like if you have somebody over here who's doing a sauna, but they don't really have that many toxins in their body, then of course they're not going to expel that many toxins. So I hope the controls were in place. I think they were. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you could look it up and let me know. But there was a study that showed basically, even still, if this group of people had a high amount of toxins in their bloodstream and they expelled a lot of it through their sweat, the amounts that they actually excreted through their sweat was similar to what came out in their urine. So that goes back to what those other guys were saying when there was not enough evidence to support. Right? So the reason why it's lower on the list of benefits to sauna use is, according to that study, you're really not expelling that many toxins from your body through your sweat in that way. It's mostly water, right? And other like electrolytes, right? So I would say a combination of sauna and exercise, and maybe that's another support for that as well, not even just in terms of what I spoke about earlier, in terms of lean muscle growth, growth hormone production, right? But it also could be for getting rid of toxins from your body through your sweat. So a combination of exercise and sauna use. Ooh. So I think there's a way that you can combine the two without, like, completely burning out, all the time. And this is what I've done for years. Right now, I'm not actively in it because, I got things to do. But there's coming up a time, and it's fast approaching, where I'm jumping back into a whole program that includes sauna use. It looks like Starbucks got themselves a new CEO, and they paid him a grip. They opened up the little Scrooge McDuck bank vault, got out all them gold coins, and basically shoved them this dude's way, basically. So yes, Starbucks hired a man by the name of Brian Niccol. And he was a former CEO of Chipotle, and he's largely credited with Chipotle's rise to the top, basically, right? Now, please know, this is a random topic. Now, this is how random this is, right? But there's some things that I want to point out here. But this is really random, because if you know me, you know that I cannot stand coffee. I don't get coffee. I don't like it. I don't understand how something that smells so good can taste so nasty. And I know what the coffee drinkers, they said it to me for years. All the coffee drinkers are just like, yo, all you gotta do is put a little bit of creamer and sugar in it. But then it's just like, I would have to put so much creamer and sugar in it, it's basically juice. And then I'm like, well, I may as well just drink juice. But if that's the case, I want to drink something healthy, I may as well drink a protein shake. You follow my logic there? So this dude. So Brian became the highest paid, or something like that. I think it was the highest paid CEO in corporate history. Right? His compensation package is ridiculous. So it's so I couldn't just randomly say yeah, he gets $60,000 a year. No, he has a full-on compensation package that is just ridiculous, right? So I had to write it down. He gets $1.6 million in base salary. Now, okay, cool. That's cool. And he gets up to $23 million a year, mind you. That base salary, $1.6 million a year, is base. That's what he's always going to get, no matter what. He gets up to $23 million in share-based bonuses annually. So that's based on, Starbucks' stock price, right? So another thing he gets is up to $3.6 million in basically a cash bonus. So that's actually more like his bonus. $1.6 million with a chance to get $3.6 million and another up to $23 million in stock options, basically. He gets a $10 million sign-on bonus, though. And then he gets another $75 to $80 million in equity replacement, basically replacing any lost value he might have by giving up, Chipotle stock, basically. That's it. But that's not it. He also gets basically he has a remote office in California that they're paying for, right? And access to the company jet. Starbucks gave him access. He gave him keys to the jet for him to travel as he sees fit. So, and that's his entire compensation package. That's bananas. And I'm just like I'm reading it again. It's just that's crazy money for a CEO of a company where the total compensation package of the guy who was in there before him was upwards would be 20 something million. This comes out to being 110, 113, 114, $115 million, something like that. That's crazy. That's crazy money. That's crazy money for a corporate job. But there's more to this, right? And let me preface this real quick by saying, like, I do not own any Chipotle stock. I do not own any Starbucks stock. So I'm not actively actually interested in what happens in promoting it or anything like that. It's just I'm more so this says a lot. This says a lot, and there's some tips that you can pull from this. There's some advice that you can pull from this. There's some actionable items that you can pull from this particular situation, right? The first thing you wanna consider is, what are people saying about this, right? So you have a man who kind of is already a proven commodity coming on, and look, Starbucks, for what it's worth, good for them. They knew exactly what they wanted and they got it, right? They stopped at nothing to get this dude. So, and from what I hear, from what I understand, Brian also negotiated some of these items as well, and Starbucks was, amenable to his side of the negotiation, right? So it was just like, he wanted to be there, they wanted him there, and this is what it required, right? But there's a lot of, I think the commentary on it is very interesting, right? So I've seen a whole bunch of different things, and I've heard bunch of different reports concerning this, saying that, like, well, their sticking point to start was the remote work thing, right? Because apparently Starbucks just called their employees back into the office. I don't know if it was full time or whatever, but that's something that's happening all across, I'm guessing, all across the world now, right? Like, remote work is probably not going anywhere, right? But it does seem to be a trend a lot of bigger companies are doing in bringing everybody back into the office for reasons, right? So, and in all honesty, I'm not saying I'm wholeheartedly against it, but I'm definitely not wholeheartedly for it, right? But there's a bunch of people basically were saying, like, he gets to work remote, but all of us, we have to go into the office. And I thought that was the silliest thing to say. It's the silliest thing to say because you're not a CEO. So what are you complaining about? Like, it's just, and it brings up what I really want to talk about here, right? The actionable item that you should take from this story is that there should not be a point in time in which you're not leveling up your skill set. Okay. We have this gentleman, Brian Nickel, who came from, basically took Chipotle from one point and put them on the map and put them on a completely different point, right? And this goes kind of hand in hand with some of the things that I've seen from, I spoke about him before, from Myron Golden, right? He has this idea that there's 4 levels of value, right? And I think this is a great example of the 4 levels of value that he speaks of, because you have people who within the corporate world are not as valuable as he is, basically saying and kind of hating on why a company would give him all of that and allow him to do all of that. And or the other flip side is why a company would make them do something that they wouldn't make their CEO do. And it's just like there's different levels of value here, right? So the way Myron Golden explained it, and I'm paraphrasing it, maybe I'll drop in a link to that if I can find it. I'll drop in a link to the video when he explains it. But there's 4 levels of value. So it's basically like the bottom level, the least valuable level, I guess, if you want to call it that, because you get paid based on your value, the value that you provide the company, but the value that you provide others, right? So now you have that lower tier level. That's basically you're just doing the work, right? So you're putting the pieces together, or you're crunching the numbers. You're really at just doing the base work. That next level up is the people who manage the people who just do the work. And there's a good chance that they're just doing some of the work as well, right? But they're the leader amongst the, maybe 5-10 people or something like that who are just doing the work, but they're still responsible for doing the work as well. And next level up, you get paid for your communication, right? So these are the communicators. These are the people who are organizing and getting everybody in order and kind of not necessarily charting the vision, but explaining the vision so that everybody understands and they know what orders and directives that they have to follow through to provide value, right? And then that last level, you get paid for your thinking. You get paid for your imagination. That top flight level, most people get paid for their imagination, their thinking, right? So there's the four levels, and again, I'm paraphrasing. I might be slightly off in some of them, but that's at least the way I look at it, right? So you have a whole bunch of people who are simply the workers. They're the ones that are doing the thing, right? And they're valuable, but they're not the ones that are charting the course. You get paid to chart the course, because if you could provide value to millions of people as opposed to just 4 or 1 by doing the thing, that's why the scales kind of change a little bit. So my suggestion then becomes just level up, constantly level up. You should be thinking about ways to level up, ways to improve each of those levels or each of those areas of value, right? So it's like, hey, look, I can do the work. Cool. All right. Don't just level up in learning how to do the work, and don't just level up to do the work better. Now, can you lead people to do the work, right? So now you got to kind of become a teacher a little bit here too. Level up in their teaching. All right. Now that next level up is communicator. Beef up your communication skills. Beef up your speech. Learn how to write better emails. Things like that. Like, and then these are silly, kind of, well, not silly examples, but smaller examples, right? Now you beefed up your communication. You beefed up already how to do the thing. You beefed up your teaching skills. You beefed up your ability to get the job done and to provide value at the base level. Now what? Now you got to beef up your thinking. You got to be able to see things from different perspectives, not just your own. And you got to be able to imagine ways to get things, imagine ways to create the most amount of value for someone else other than yourself. The people at the lowest end of that value scale, they're not doing that. They're doing the work, right? So there's a big difference. And what I found was a lot of the people, and I'm not saying all, I'm not saying every, I'm just in the general sense, a lot of the people, though, that were complaining about this man's compensation package, they weren't necessarily on a level of being paid for their imagination. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is it's important for you to level up your skills so that you can level up the value that you provide others, not just yourself, right? And that's important. So this dude got paid on the value that he provides others, right? So, and a lot of the people who are complaining are just worried about the value that's provided to them. So there's a big difference, and I get it, and I understand it in some cases, because again, not all CEOs are good guys, right? Like, and I understand some of the people who are just like, you know, CEOs are trash. Why do they get paid so much, and so on and so forth. But if you really think about it, like when it comes to business, I mean, again, that highest level of value is your thinking, your imagination. How can you orchestrate and organize providing the maximum amount of value to people, to humanity, right? So it's just like, I guess the group of people that I don't particularly get are just the people who are like CEOs, they get paid so much. Grr. Like, grow up. They get paid that much for a reason, right? And if you are mad at how much they get paid or how little you get paid, well, level up. Provide more value. And it might not be with a company. It might just be to humanity, period, right? Or find a better situation. Use your imagination to create a better situation in which you're paid more instead of complaining about it, right? So that's my advice concerning that, right? And that's what I see from this particular situation, right? Good for him. He's obviously worked. He's obviously put things together. He's obviously using something because he already has proof of concept. So it's just like, good for him. I mean, that's a lot of money, but but good for him, right? My hope is that you would take something from that and say, hey, you know what? All right, I'm gonna become a better this. I'm gonna become a better that. I'm gonna become a better communicator. I'm gonna become a better teacher. I'm gonna become a better thinker, right? 'Cause that's how you really increase the value that you provide to humanity. All right, let's keep it pushing. So, if you recall, maybe first or second episode, I mentioned that I would not dive or delve into politics, that I will not get political, so to speak. And I still plan on sticking by that. But why would I say that if many of the conversations that I have outside of the podcast are of political in nature, right? So let's in order for me to explain this a little bit, I want to go off of a definition. The definition, what is politics in general, right? And this is just I don't even know from what dictionary, Webster or something like that, right? So by definition, politics is the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. And the main reason why I don't typically want to discuss politics on this podcast is one, because it's not a political podcast, right? And listen, right now we're at a stage where we're being beat over the head with everybody's political ideology, one way or the other. And I'll let you know, initially, I am pretty much smack dab in the middle when it comes to American politics, right? And I explain all this stuff again because I see the political spectrum as largely an amoral arena, right? Where the discussion isn't necessarily centered around morality. Is really one side versus the other, and one side's trying to hold on to power, and in this instance, the power is the ability to tell people what to do. Right? Like, and you can argue that there were some good people in power and there were some terrible individuals in power. I'm not really up for that debate in and of itself, because at the end of the day, they all have to do things that can be seen as morally just or morally corrupt. That's kind of the nature of the game there, right? So that's why I say that it's largely an amoral spectrum, right? There's an amoral arena there. But another reason why I don't dig into this stuff is because, or I don't dig into it on the podcast, but I would definitely explore that in conversations I have with others, is that, like, no matter what, I always will kind of go back to what God says and what God said. And most of my arguments from a political spectrum kind of fall down to that. So I have a little bit of an issue where I'm saying, like, hey, politics is amoral, so I'm trying to take this amoral thing and apply morality to it. It gets to be a little difficult. And that's not at all the point of the podcast in and of itself. And really, this random topic really just came from a question that surprisingly, a number of people have asked me. How come you don't talk about any of your political ideologies on the podcast? And it's just, again, the whole idea for this podcast is to, one, introduce you to the Scout method, but to help you build up your health in all arenas, in your entire being. Your physicality, your mentality, your emotionality, and your spirituality. We want to cover all four of those. Honestly, talking about politics isn't really gonna do it for you. It's okay. And that doesn't help in building any of those things up. But what I will do is I'll take real life situations, things that go on, and especially in these random topics, and we just talk about these things because, again, we're searching for the truth, right? And what I found was that the political spectrum, the political arena, is not that full of truth. And the thing is, it is all about power, one side versus the other, right? You shouldn't get to a point where you think that one side is better than the other because of this, that, and the third. They just line up with what you believe a little bit more, right? And it's interesting because people would often kind of challenge me on my thinking a little bit, and I welcome that. But they challenge me on my thinking when it comes to, well, whether politics is an amoral arena, right? Because it's just like, the country was founded on Christian beliefs. Were they, though? Or were they founded on theist beliefs, which is a little bit different, right? So, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be people all over the place who are going to be like, well, no, actually, this, and this. Okay, cool. So how does that play out in present day? All right. So all the while, I don't want to misspeak. I just say that a lot of times I don't, and I won't bring up any of the political ideas in here because, one, a lot of them are incendiary, but I will look for the truth. Okay, again, I will look for the truth. And what I found, again, is that a lot of people aren't telling the truth. So what am I supposed to do with that? Why would I talk about that? Like, what is it? It's interesting where it's just like, one side. And let me put it this way. We're in the middle of another election cycle, and the number one thing going around is just like, well, and we know this, and somehow we accept it. It's usually the politician with the most money that invests the most money wins. That's it. Doesn't matter what their ideas are. It doesn't matter whether they believe in God or not. It doesn't matter if they they think what we're doing and how we're lining up and the economy is this, that, and the third. No. The one who wins is the one who has the most economic standing backing them. The most big time players with the most money investing in their campaign. That's what it comes down to. That's what it always comes down to. So while we're discussing ideas, they're promoting fears. And when you think about it, the nature of politics is also to kind of, and maybe this is a little bit strong, and I'm open to being, wrong about this one, but the nature of politics is to deceive, right? Like, I forgot what famous president said it. It doesn't really matter. What he said actually matters the most. Right? It's just like, in order to really win, you have to get into the hearts of the people. And maybe it was a political commentator or something like that. And I'm probably paraphrasing that as well. But it's almost all emotionally driven without any real sound thinking. So when you get a person who's discussing policy like I do, I look at the policy of all this stuff. Like, what are they saying policy-wise? How do they actually plan to govern? Not, oh, I'm voting because I'm afraid that this other person is going to do this or that person is going to do that. Like, there's too much fear. There's too much anger. There's too much hatred. There's too much of all that stuff that's already present in regular non-election cycle life for it to be turned up to the scale of 20 just because somebody's trying to get you to vote for them. And that's politics. That's why I don't have it on a podcast. My job is to build you all up. Whether that's physically, again, we can go over the arenas a gazillion times, but that's my job. My job is to build you up. The job of politics is not that. It's not that, and I always go back to Saul. the children of Israel wanted Saul because he was pretty. They wanted Saul to lead them. God didn't want to put anybody in place of, like, no, we want a king. We want to be like other nations. We want Saul. He looks good. What? And thus begins our downfall. So it's just like, why? Like, our king was right there. He was God he was right there, and he was like, we want Saul. Like, I can't. So yeah, nah, I'm good on the politics. So I typically don't like politicians in general, right? So I'm not for this one and against this one, but I will call a spade a spade. If they're saying a bunch of junk, they're saying a bunch of junk. If they're actively participating in taking advantage of a people, they're actively participating in taking advantage of a people. It is what it is, though. But that's the main reason why I just will not dig into the political spectrum here on this podcast. But please note, though, even judging by the random topics that I've already had on here, we still do talk about the stuff that goes on. It's just not through the political lens, right? I don't care about polls. I don't care about ratings. I mean, a lot of what happens, by way of bills and things like that, I actually study. I study and look into. I try and see if people are absolute liars or not. I mean, look, they all lie. They all lie. They all lie, and they're actively lying. So, now I'm not saying, look, I'm not trying to convince you to make a choice one way or the other, or to sit out or do whatever. I'm not trying to convince you to do anything other than what you're already doing. I'm just explaining to you why I'm not going to go as deep into those topics as I would, other goings on and things that are going on around in the world, right? So I just wanted to drop that off. Nothing major. I know this episode is already running pretty long, so I'm a kind of just jump out there, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right. All right, peeps. That's episode 7. The other health stuff in the books. Oh, I'm sorry. Part 1, right? Part 2 is coming right on up. Listen, I need you to do all those things that would traditionally help out a brand spanking new podcaster / YouTuber / whatever /. In other words, help a brother out. Help me out. No, listen, if I've provided any value for you at all whatsoever, I just ask that you share it. I just ask that you pass it along to somebody else. And even if I didn't, even if it's just like, just help me, help you, help me, help you. Right? But either way, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese in the Studio. And you just got finished listening to the Scout Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. I'll see y'all on the next one. Take care.